On May 11, 1984, around 30 guests from Six Flags Great Adventure in Jackson Township, New Jersey, they were just enjoying being frightened at a haunted castle. But as many spooky haunted houses, it had very long and narrow corridors and kind of like labyrinths with strobe lights in certain areas and creepy sound effects. And it also had designated areas such as the Busher, the Phantom, and the Lady on the Wheel, along with real employees dressed with Halloweenish costume like the Hunchback of Notre Dame or Dracula, whose all purpose was to scare jump you as you were walking the dim corridors with your heart pounding from the unexpected horrors. That day around 6:30 p.m., a fire was started and it rapidly engulfed the castle. From the outside, park visitors could see the smoke rising to the sky and they start seeing the flames coming through the front door, and eventually they saw the tower collapse. For those inside, the light never came on. They were kept in the dark and the creepy music kept playing. The exit lights were very hard to find and basically there was nothing to help them escape the fire. The haunted castle was built in 1979 as a temporary attraction and it consisted of 16 interconnected truck trailers, 8 in each side, and they mirror each other. So basically they have everything the same, just mirroring. Like the entrance, both of them were here, the exits were here, and they had the same props, the same decoration, and they were referred as the red side or the blue side. On a slow day, they will just open one side. On a busy day, they will open both sides so they can roll 2 groups at the same time. It also had a trailer right in the middle, which was the control room and the dressing room for the employees. On that Friday, May 11, 1984, only one side was open, which was the red side, located at the right side, and employees were allowing approximately 10 visitors to enter every minute. It is believed that one of the guests used a lighter, which is something that they knew sometimes guests will do to kind of try to find his way out of the spooky maze. This happened at the corner where the strobe lights were, which were malfunctioning that day, and sometimes it would leave the corner in complete darkness. Now, that corner of the haunted house, it had like a foam pad on the wall because people kept bumping themselves against that wall. But it kind of was like damaged, right? So it is believed that this person accidentally touched that pad with the flame, and that's what started the fire. And even though he tried to put it off, he wasn't successful. But to make things worse, the air conditioning was still on, and it will like keep feeding the fire and make it spread even faster. As you can imagine, being inside the haunted castle on a regular day, it was very disorienting. I mean, that was the whole purpose. So you were lost, you didn't know where you were going, and people were going to scare you. But then you add the real smoke and the real fire, and everybody that was inside, they were just freaking out. One of the survivors even said that she basically was in the haunted house when she suddenly saw the black smoke basically chasing her as she tried to run away for safety. And another one said that at first he thought the smoke was part of the haunted house, and when he eventually realized what was happening, he started running and he was stumbling and tripping and crashing against the wall until he was able to escape. Now, within minutes, the fire rescues were there, and it took them about an hour to control the fire, but by 7:45, the fire was pretty much controlled, and the haunted house was pretty much gone. At first, it was believed everybody had been evacuated from the attraction, but as they started to inspect the site, they found 8 bodies in a very narrow corridor, and they were so severely damaged that they were initially mistaken for burned mannequins. Now, 7 of those bodies, they were pretty much all together around the hunchback display, and the 8th one near the coffin display, and they were relatively close to the main entrance, but they just didn't make it. This group of teens have entered the haunted house together. However, there was one more person with them, but she was able to survive, and her name was Suzette Elliott, and she was 15 years old. And she explained she was in the line with her friend. Her friend was Tina Genovese, 15, Joseph Bioruti Jr., 17, and Nicholas Cayasa, 18. And they entered the haunted house with another group of five, which were later identified as Jose Carrion Jr., 17, Christopher Harrison, 17, Eric Rodriguez, 18, Lenin Ruiz, 17, and Samuel Valentin Jr., 17. Now, once they were inside, she and her friends, they were basically arm in arm, walking together in the very dark corridors when they got jump scared by one of the workers. And eventually, the two groups decided to kind of hide in a corner to scare the next group of people that came. But then they heard somebody screaming fire, and then they saw the smoke like rolling towards them, and they just panicked and freaked out and tried to run. She was knocked down and stepped on, but she was able to stand up, and she was like separated from her friends, blindly trying to find the exit because she couldn't see anything, breathing the smoke. And at one point she kind of knelt down because she felt like she couldn't keep going. And at that point, one of the workers found her and she was rescued. Most of these victims were at this park on a class trip, so they weren't there with their parents, they were with the school basically. And there were also other 7 people who were treating for a smoke inhalation that day. Now, while the fire was still going, the park never closed. It continued their normal activities, and they even had a concert. But at that time, they believed nobody was hurt. And eventually it did close 2 hours early at 8 p.m. Today, it is still considered one of the deadliest amusement park tragedies in the United States. How did the fire get out of control so quickly? Well, the haunted castle, it was built in 1979 as a temporary attraction, meaning it was supposed to be there for the season and then taken away. However, people loved it, so it was there for 5 years before it burned down. But because it was on wheels and it was basically trailers, it was still considered a temporary attraction. Now, the park itself, they barely pay any attention to this attraction because 1, it was located deep in the park and on the side, and 2, it didn't have a roller coaster attached, therefore it wasn't like a main attraction, but it was still very popular. But because it wasn't a main attraction, they did the bare minimum to keep it running. As a result, some of the interiors were basically falling apart, including the wall patio where the fire was believed to have started. This haunted castle, it was essentially a fire hazard on wheels. All the materials used to create the labyrinths and the maze and the props, they were very flammable, like wood or loose fabric and loose like paper and foam. And it lacked the most essential fire safety like sprinklers and smoke detectors or enough emergency exit doors. What is even worse is that the area where the bodies were discovered, there had been a suggestion to add an exit door right there, but it was never done. Now, despite these dangerous conditions, the state inspection agencies allow the park to continue operating this haunted castle. They will come and they say, we recommend you for you to place this, add the sprinklers, add the fire alarm, add more exit doors. But because it technically was a temporary building, it wasn't mandatory, therefore they didn't enforce it. Now, to be fair, at one point they did put battery-operated smoke detectors and place fire extinguishers, which made me believe that they kind of knew that the haunted castle was a fire hazard. However, after they were vandalized by parkgoers, they were never replaced, and they refused to put the sprinklers because they were too expensive. During the investigation, they also discovered that the haunted castle had very poorly lit emergency lights with broken or missing bulbs, and they also find out that the employees also knew that the guests were using either lighters or matches to kind of find their way inside the maze, and this problem was never taken care of. Even worse, the conditions inside the haunted castle were so poor then in 1983, so the year before, the employees kind of protested about the poorly conditions inside the haunted castle. And there's one, they filed a complaint saying something along the lines of, forget it, there's too many problems to mention. But the problem was basically never taken care of. As you can imagine, parents heard about the fire and everybody was like trying to find out where their kids were, since many of these kids had gone to the park on a school field trip. And for those parents that their kids never made it home, they were searching for answers, and they went to the park the following day in the morning to try to get information, just to find the park open to all guests as if nothing had happened. Like, people were just screaming and laughing, and these parents were trying to find if their kids were alive or dead. What is even worse is one of the parents even said that he was not allowed in the park without buying a day ticket for admission. Now, for those parents whose kids didn't come home, they were asked to bring dental record as a form of identification, since the bodies were so damaged they were not able to recognize them. And this process will take hours before they were able to make the proper identification. However, for the father of Joseph Bailey Ruti Jr., the answer might have come a little earlier, because he found his son's car in the parking lot, and as soon as he saw it, he knew his son was one of the victims. Eventually, the park was clear of any wrongdoing, since technically they had followed the required regulations by the state law. Instead, the jury blamed the Jackson Township officials for allowing the castle to continue operating even though it was a fire hazard. Parents of the victims, they opened a civil suit against the park. 7 of them were settled out of court for $2.5 million each, and the one that went to trial, they were awarded $750,000. As a result of this tragedy, new fire safety requirements for amusement parks such as the haunted house were passed, which required all structures that are designed to be disoriented, or they have reduced vision, or present any difficulties or barriers in the flow of traffic, to be equipped with fire alarms that, when triggered, it will turn the lights on automatically, and it will turn any confusing sounds off. Whatever was left of the haunted castle was removed, and a flower garden was planted. And eventually, in 1997, this garden was demolished, and the Autobahn bumper car was relocated to this area. But it too eventually was demolished, and the cyborg silver spin was placed in there, and it opened in 2018, and it's still open today. Sadly, there is no memorial at the site. And here is where the spooky begins. A night when the bumper cars still existed, which were built on the ground where the horrible fire had happened, and after all the visitors had left the park, leaving it completely quiet, the workers, as they began to finish their job, often say that they would walk quickly whenever they had to pass in front of the auto bumper cars. They didn't like being around there. It felt wrong, like a strange and uneasy feeling that they couldn't explain. And they sometimes too could see like things moving out of the corner of their eyes. Then the clicking sound will start. First, the sound was kind of like an intercom clicking on and off randomly sometimes just a few clicks, sometimes a lot of clicks very fast together. Needless to say, they will always rush or run out of that area, trying not to freak out. Some of the visitors claim to have seen like a ghost or a spirit like walking around the floor passing like the bumper cars, and they have seen also the face of a ghost on the fake window of the facade building of the ride. They also claim to see kind of black shadowy figures. And another one said that one time he saw a boy kind of like far at the exit that said, "I shouldn't have gone back in tonight," and then just poof, it disappeared. Other people claim that the Batman and Robin the Chiller ride was jigs because it was near the location where the haunted castle fire happened. And this ride basically, it was doomed from day one. It had multiple problems and caused many injuries to the point where it was removed in 2007. Another worker, he claimed that he was trying to take a picture of the then new Green Lantern coaster with his phone. And he was like seeing the image, but he could see like this cloud with a very opaque like middle and very like see-through around, and no matter where he moved his phone, he will still see that. And he made sure his fingers weren't like photobombing the shot, but no matter what he did, it was still there, to the point where he believed it must have been a ghost that wanted to make his presence known. Another visitor said that she saw from the corner of her eyes a guy that she described as a white dude between 17 and 23 years old, who was standing next to her with like curly red or brownish afro and a red shirt. And she asked her boyfriend, "Hey, did you see somebody standing next to me?" And he said, "No, I actually feel like I saw someone sitting next to you." And when he described him to her, they both felt it was the same person, a ghost from the 80s or 90s. To be fair, some believe this last ghost was actually the ghost of Scott Taylor, which was a 20-year-old employee that died during the test ride of the Rolling Thunder coaster in 1981. There was also another incident of a 19-year-old girl named Karen Ann Brown that fell 75 feet to her death from the lightning loops in 1987. So maybe this park is full of ghosts.